Buongiorno, everyone. Good morning. This is part two of my story and leading up to the reason why I moved to Italy. As I stated yesterday, is I am breaking up into several segments to tell you the story of what I did in Italy, how I came here, and why I moved here now, 33 years later. But first, I want to thank you all for your support, your kind words, your comments, and so many people in the last couple of days that I've known in the past over the years reached out. It's so wonderful to reconnect with you all. I appreciate you. So many beautiful memories and stories that I've been reminded of. So thank you. And I thank you all for your support and sharing our page, our stories, our content. Ellie and I, my daughter, who does all my videography and editing. She's here with me in Italy. Sharing our content with your family and friends. It's really been wonderful. But first I want to show you, I just finished my yoga class here in Venice. Yes, there's yoga in Venice. And it's in an African art gallery, which is right here. Yeah. But it's on the Grand Canal, so I want to show you this view. This is what I look at out the window when we're doing yoga here. This is the morning yoga view. It's pretty spectacular. And then I want to show you this beautiful palm too. This tree. It's so gorgeous. Look at this. It's truly spectacular. It's massive. It's massive. See the lady there? Anyhow, I'll pick up where I left off yesterday. At the end of yesterday's conversation, I told you how I'd arrived in Rome, and I spoke very little Italian, and I went to my flat where it was not clean. There was a cot in the middle of the room. There was no electricity, no hot water at all, no toilet seat, no shower. So it was just a tub. And back then, restaurants had candles on table when live fire was still allowed. Even in here in Italy. So every night after service, after working all day and night, I would take candles from the tables and bring them back to my little tiny table next to my cot in the middle of the room, and that was my light. And I had a bottle of Jack Daniels, everyone knows that, and I would lay on my cot after my shower and take sips and read books on Italy, history, food, the culture, and it was a wonderful way to understand more and learn the language. So from there, Faith Heller Willinger, her book, Eating in Italy back then, was the guide. This was before slow food and when they were making their guides. And it was really, hers was the guide to eat. So in her book was In Venice Alcovo, and she spoke highly of Cesare Bonelli. So I went to Alcovo, I went to Venice, and as I always did, I would go and eat in a restaurant before I would ask to work there for free as a stage. So I went to Alcovo, I had dinner, and I met Diane, who's Cesare's wife. She's from Texas, a warm, wonderful spirit, always smiling. And I had a dinner where I experienced fish like I'd never tasted it before. And I was so excited. I asked her I told her what I was doing in Italy, if I could work there. And after dinner was over, she brought me to Cesare. This is a long time ago. And she said, Luke wants to work here. And I said, I would like to work here as a stage and cook. And he wasn't he wasn't having it. He refused me. He said, no, absolutely not. And he said, we only use the freshest ingredients. We don't use glutamates or bases. Like I wouldn't understand it. And I tried to explain to him that I was a young, passionate cook and I would work for free. And he still said, he turned me down. And I was very discouraged. I would say even heartbroken that night because I was so excited to go experience that. So at that moment, Diane came outside as I was leaving and said, give him a day or two. Come back tomorrow, the next day, and I'll talk to him. So I went back, and somehow Diane worked her magic, and Cesare accepted me to come into the kitchen and work. So from there, we started a wonderful relationship, and now we're dear friends, we're family for all these years. I would say that when I was at Alcovo, what I experienced was that in Italy, is that I say back then, it was when I really tasted food for the very first time. Because Cesare was all about the seasons, following. We would get up early, go to the markets, go to the Rialto market, get the produce, get the fish, pick them, and then have them delivered. The menu, there was no written menu. There was a structure: antipasti, pasta, secondi, dessert, and every day it was different. Just depending on what we had in the market, we would create the menu. Cesare would create the menu, and I would cook it. And then after time, he gave me some freedom, and I was doing some dishes as well later on. But what intrigued me too was he on his menu it said, "Our fish only speak Italian," meaning that all the fish was locally sourced. None of it was farmed ever, still to this day. And he was very passionate about that, and still is. Only local ingredients, vegetables, fish, produce, the best meats, the few dishes they have. And in the fall, wild game, wild birds from Lagoon, Venetian Lagoon. So it was a real eye-opening experience, and it really transformed me as a chef, and my understanding of the importance of ingredients and following the seasons. Italian food is all about seasonality, following the seasonal ingredients when they're at their peak. And then they go away, and then you have more appreciation for them when they come back into season. So, I remember it was long days. All the restaurants I worked in were, I'd start up, I was so excited, I'd get up, get there 8 or 9 in the morning. We'd work until 3 or 4. We'd be back at 6 until 1 a.m. So the days were long, 14-hour days, but I was tireless. I was 23 years old, and I was so excited about what we were doing, what I was learning, and having the opportunity that I was really cooking in Italy. It was surreal. I remember in the afternoons we'd have an hour or 2 break, sometimes less, and then I'd either go for a run or I would just sleep on the banquettes in the dining room at Alcovo and take a nap, because my apartments they provided for me sometimes were far, like on the island of Lido or Giudecca, which are across the water, or far away in Venice, and I didn't have time to go home. So that's what we did. And from there, I had a friend of mine who's a sommelier in Boston said I should go to a wine fair called Vinitaly, which is in Verona every year. And it's one of the world's largest wine fairs, and I've gone for many, many years in my career. But my first time was in this period. After I left Alcovo, I went there, and I forget who said it, but someone said, go to Slow Food, go visit Carlo Petrini, who's the president and founder of Slow Food, that he founded in the 80s when he saw the first McDonald's arrive to Rome. And he wasn't pleased with that, so he started this movement of food, agriculture, people, human connection, the artisans, the producers, the chefs, and maintaining Italian food and culture, then it just became a worldwide movement, and a beautiful one at that. So, as I said, Carlo he passed away just a month ago, and I had plans to visit him in Piemonte this November in truffle season where he lived, and spend time with him. But spend time with him around the table, but that table's going to have to wait. So when I went to Vinitaly, Slow Food had this, Arcigolo Slow Food had this stand. This was at the very beginnings of Slow Food, before it was worldwide. And Carlo Petrini was there, and he had his group. They had 2 restaurants. They had 2 restaurants, one in Bra, one in Alba. And they had the chefs and the people that worked in the restaurants. They had this booth and a makeshift kitchen, and they were cooking food. Here's my walk. I'll just give you a quick view. pretty, isn't it? So I was 23. My town was really poor. So I went up. I had to conjure up the courage to go say hello to this group of people, and I knew Carla was there. And I did the best I could. And Carlo was just spectacular, an amazing human being, became a dear friend and mentor. So they took me in, and Carlo invited me up to Piemonte. So I went to Piemonte. I worked in Bra, where Archigolo Slow Food is based, at the restaurant Bocon di Vino, where we made pastas every single day by hand. We made big batches, no mixer, all hand, by hand, on the table. And it was spectacular, an eye-opener. And what I loved about it was the people, the culture of Piemonte, very different from anywhere else. In Italy, it's what I love about it. Italian food, you can't say that there's one national cuisine. For me, it's the definition of the spirit of the people. And that it depends on wherever you are, who had ruled it in the past, left their thumbprint, their influence on it. And that translates to the food and what you have at the table. But the basics are always the same. There's antipasti, pasta, secondi, dessert. But the spirit is the same as well, in that everyone celebrates the seasons, cooks only seasonal, and Italians are very passionate about food. It's always a discussion, it's always a debate, and Italians generally really know good quality food. So in Piemonte, we traveled around. It took me to Monaco. We went to south of France. We went up to Valdosta, up in the mountains. So Carlo was just wonderful. And from there, it was knowing Carlo, knowing Cesare, and meeting winemakers. It opened up so many doors for me, because here's the morning gondola rides. So my life got a lot easier traveling around. So whenever I would talk about places or a region, Carlo would suggest places, Cesare would suggest places. For example, I went to Friuli and worked at a great place there, which I love the cuisine there. So much different. Wonderful. I think some of the finest white wines in Italy, very interesting red wines. The food there, the smoked ricotta, the culture, the salami culture there is beautiful. I adore Friuli and the people. So, and then I met people and restaurateurs and winemakers. So when I did, they would all make suggestions and even make phone calls for me. So they would say, hey, there's this American kid who works for free, he's a hard worker, he's passionate about Italian food and wine and culture. Take him in. So it just was spectacular. And then from there, I worked in many different regions, in Piemonte, Friuli, Venice, Tuscany. I spent time with Dario Cecchini, the famous butcher from Panzano. I spent a couple of weeks working with him, understanding meat and butchering and Tuscan traditions. And I worked in Sicily in a few places, a great pastry shop outside of Palermo, and a beautiful fish restaurant in Porticello. And then Puglia as well, in Lecce and Ceglie Massapico, different places. So it opened a lot of doors for me, and I was so passionate, so excited to go work and learn Italian food. And it was wonderful, but it wasn't always. It was hard at times, because I was 23, I was alone, and I traveled, and you get homesick, and I didn't factor that in. And I want to show you. This is La Fenice. This is the famous. Teatro. It's gorgeous. Let me see if we can take a peek in there. Let me see. I'm going to see if we can take a peek in here. Why not? It may work, may not. So, open a lot of doors for me. Yeah, can't get in there. Okay, well, we tried. Okay, we'll do it another time. I'll just have to go to a show and take it in. So, yeah, on the journey, it was, I stayed in pensione, little, very, very modest hotels, if you call them that, rooms essentially. And I would do my laundry in the sinks and wring it out by hand and hang it over the furniture and the heaters and where it was available. But I loved it. I traveled, I ate all around. And I remember the phone call. I would call my mom probably once a week because there was no internet back then. This is 1993. There's no internet. There was no cell phones. There was public phones, and you had to go to the tabaccaria and get these coins called gettone. And you'd put so many in, and you'd see how far an international call would go. Usually got cut off. But there were times too where it's not all a highlight reel. It was difficult. It was lonely, and I called my mom. And one time I considered coming home early, and I didn't know how I was going to do it because I didn't have a plane ticket. And she said to me, as much as I miss and love you, you know what you need to do. So I knew then that I had to finish it. I had to stay. So from there, it all got much better. It all got much better. And looking back in retrospect, all the things that push us in life, all the challenges we have, all the things that force us to grow are beautiful. Whatever expands our vessel, the challenges, the circumstances, the people, that they turn into beautiful stories, and that's the way I see it. And anytime I've had these challenges in my life, just you do the best you can, work through them. So I didn't give up. I stayed, and it turned into a beautiful journey and a story, and there's so much more. But after that, I came home. I ran out of money. I went home, and that's a funny story. My daughter Ellie wanted to encourage me to tell all the pieces of it. I didn't have a plane ticket, and after the flight home, with all the turbulence and everything, flying internationally in the snowstorm in New York, I was a little terrified of flying. And I've since overcome that fear. I fly for years now. I fly easily. But I said, okay, let's make an adventure out of this. My sister was a travel agent, still is. I said, how about I take the QE2 home, the Queen Elizabeth II, which sounds really glamorous and expensive. But so she got me a ticket, and it was not a glorious ticket. My cabin was a cabin which was below the sea level, below the water level. So I had no windows, no porthole, because I was underwater. And I had this thought, oh, it's nice, it's warm, it's the end of summer, I'll hang out on the deck for 5 days, it's a 5-day trip. I'll read books on the outside by the pool, and it's all inclusive. I paid one price. I got a really cheap ticket because I was like the last on board. But it's the North Atlantic, and the water's freezing. The wind was so hard that the ship was tilting the whole time, and I was half seasick. And I was on the deck in blankets with another English couple chatting, trying to read my book. It was so windy and cloudy and cold, it was almost impossible. And then, funny enough, the Concorde flew over, and I think I jumped off the deck, probably 10 feet in the air. So that was an experience. And then one day before we got to New York, the captain came on and says, well, folks, we are experiencing an extreme storm, and we're going to have to, there's some icebergs near where the Titanic sank, and they broke off, and we have to divert south for an extra 36 hours. And I remember that night of the storm, it was so bad, it was so rough that It knocked me out of my bed, out of the cot. My room was like it wasn't fancy at all. It had like a cot. And it knocked me out onto the floor. Anyhow, we were fine. I made it to New York. And that's the end of part one of my first stages. And so I went home. I worked in restaurants. I worked in Philadelphia. I worked in and saved more money. And then I went back in 1995 and worked at Alcovo. Cesare asked me to come back and be a chef to be paid. So I came back, worked in Alcovo for 1995. I stayed a year, but the issue was that I didn't have a visa, so we had to figure that out. And so I went to San Francisco. I worked with Jeremiah Tower at Stars, and then opened up JT's Bistro as a sous chef. It was a great experience. Loved San Francisco. I worked with Paolo Bertoli, some great chefs there. And Cesare arranged. He drew up a contract and made me a partner in Alcovo, where I owned 10% of the business, just enough to make me legal. And then I obtained my visa, and I came back and worked for a couple of more years in 1997 and 1998. And then I'm just approaching my house now. I have some meetings that I have to tend to, so I want to thank you all for being here. Tomorrow we'll start, my next phase will be this, is that when I arrived home, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to open a restaurant. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then a man named Steve Wynn called me. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. Thank you all for being here. Tomorrow I will fill you in on what started my casino journey in the United States and my business there. So thank you all. Appreciate and love you all. Your kind words, your comments, your support. And I'll see you tomorrow for part 3. Ciao, ciao.